Well, hello and welcome back. It is Thursday, February 27th. My name is Guy Stevens. I am the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. And this is the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint podcast. And we are excited to have you here today. We've got a special guest with us today, but I'm excited to have you here for another episode. And we're going to have a great conversation with our guest here today, who is Meghan Ashburn. And I'm going to be introducing Meghan in just a minute. But before I do, a little bit about kind of who we are and what this is. As I mentioned, my name is Guy Stevens. I'm the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, which is an organization that I started. Oh gosh, we're going on 6 years. It started in 2019, in the spring of 2019, and I guess we're rolling up to a 6-year anniversary. But started in the spring of 2019, kind of based on an experience, and we're really doing work initially very focused on restraint and seclusion as an issue, but it's far broader than that. It's restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment. It's all the things we often do to people very often in the name of behavior. And of course, it's the impact of that. The Alliance was started around that issue, but it really is about, how do we move away from punitive and exclusionary discipline? How do we move away from outdated approaches to behavior that are not only not working, but are failing kids? And that's really where our work lies. We're excited to have our guest here today, and we're going to be having a conversation. Many of you may already know who Meghan is, and I'll be introducing Meghan in just a moment. But before I do that, I want to share a couple of other quick announcements with you. One, as always, when we do these live, they are live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And of course, you can go back to any of those platforms after the fact. So if you aren't able to watch the whole thing today and you want to go back later and watch it, you can go to any of those platforms. YouTube is sometimes the best place to do that. I think it's a little easier sometimes to find everything there. But you can go back anytime. We also will make a audio only version available. So if you like to listen on the go, you like to drive and walk, jog, whatever it is, we'll make it available as an audio podcast. You'll be able to download it on Apple Podcast or Spotify, wherever you might happen to listen or get your podcast. So a couple additional announcements here. One is I want to thank our sponsor and also mention that we are looking for additional sponsors. So having sponsors for our podcast helps us to bring the podcast to you. We've been doing this now for 5 years. We have many, many episodes of the podcast. We have interviews and presentations by just amazing people and lots of really valuable discussions. But we are looking for sponsors to help us bring the podcast to you. So if you are with an organization or a business and you want to sponsor our podcast, please reach out. I'd be happy to talk to you about what our sponsorships offers look like. But I do want to thank Supportable Solutions, who has been a sponsor now for quite some time. Connie Persick and Supportable Solutions. You may know Connie for the Why Toolkit. And I'm going to play a brief little ad here about the Why Toolkit to give you a little bit more information on what that is.
Behaviors are signals to the deeper whys. The Why Toolkit, a tool built for and approved by teachers, parents, and administrators that can both assess and support individuals struggling with behaviors. Connie has created a document that turns typical behavioral documents upside down and replaces them with a deep dive into what really matters: how to support each child within a compassionate and relational framework based on their individual differences. The Why Toolkit was found to decrease seclusion and restraint by 21% in a year-long pilot study.
And I want to thank Supportable Solutions and Connie for being a sponsor of the podcast. It helps us to do all the things that we do to bring this podcast to you. And really Connie's somebody that is a friend, a collaborator, somebody whose work I think very highly of, and recommend that you check out Supportable Solutions. I do want to mention here one other quick announcement. We really value all of the people that are part of our community, and we have an amazing community. We have parents and caregivers, we have educators, paraprofessionals, occupational therapists, attorneys, self-advocates. We have such an amazing community, and for me, it's really a pleasure to be able to work with so many people that are coming together and working to bring about change. And this work that we're doing collectively, there's such a tremendous need for it, and there really is, this moment in time, the need for disrupting systems that aren't working, and fighting for civil rights and human rights. Really critical work. And of course, we are a very, very, very small nonprofit. People sometimes think we're larger than we are. We are not. We are two staff members and a team of volunteers, but we're doing this work because we think it's so critical to bringing about change. One of the things that we're trying to do is we need more support. We need support to be able to do the work that we're doing, to be able to bring podcasts to you like this, to be able to develop training and programs for schools, and to be able to do things to really bring about change, whether it's providing testimony for legislation or supporting a community. So I want to encourage you to think about, if you might be able to help us with that as well. And one of the things that we're doing now is we have an opportunity for people that are interested in joining the Alliance. And what joining the Alliance is it's kind of a membership, and that when you become a member, you join the Alliance, you make a small monthly donation, and that can be as little as $5 a month. But those donations really kind of help us to do the work that we're doing. So when you go to the Alliance website and you click on Join Us, you can find out information about joining the Alliance. And again, there's a number of different membership levels. They start around $5 a month. You can be a supporter. We have an advocate level of $25 a month. We also have sponsorships, and the sponsors actually get a ad on our podcast as well. But this enables and helps us to do this work. It's a tough time in the world right now to be a small nonprofit, and we really do need help and support to be able to continue doing the things we're doing. So I just wanted to encourage you to think about how you might support the work that we're doing. And with that, let's get to why you're really here. And it's not to hear me talk about, talk about helping us, but it is here to meet our special guest today. So I am bringing up on the screen Meghan Ashburn. Really excited to have Meghan here with us today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who Meghan is. Some of you may already know, and maybe you even participated in a past book study with us. We did a book study of a book that Meghan co-wrote with Jules Edwards, I Will Die on This Hill. And let me tell you a little bit about Meghan. Meghan is a continuous learner, and that's something that I relate to very, very much. I'm now in my 50s and continuing to try to, trying to learn. I'm a big proponent of the idea that if we know better, we do better. And we only know better if we are continuous learners. So I really appreciate that. Former elementary educator, family support specialist, speaker, co-author of the award-winning book, I Will Die on This Hill. Her book club of over 15,000 members publishes book recommendation lists on autism and neurodiversity. Her website, notanautismmom.com, is packed with resources for parents and educators. And of course, Meghan has advocated for many really critical things like communication rights and inclusion at the local, state, and national levels of government. And Meghan is somebody that is what I would say is a good disruptor, somebody out there, making good trouble to try to change things that aren't working. And Meghan, it's an honor to have you here today, and we're really excited to have you join us.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you. I had no idea that your organization was so young. I had no idea.
Yeah, well, we started. It's been almost 6 years ago, and started because of the experience with my son. I mean, I know you can relate to that, but this was never my my planned pathway. I had no intent, 7 years ago, of like leaving a job I had been at for over 2 decades and starting a nonprofit, but it's kind of what happened. And we're a little organization, but I kind of believe that we can be small and have impact, and that's kind of what we've tried to do. But it's
definitely small but mighty, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Really, really important, and that's a great thing about the world. Sometimes is you can have more impact than you realize you can have. So I want to encourage people that might be watching live, and I know there's a number of people watching live right now. I usually say this sooner, but if you've watched us before, I'm going to ask you to do this. I'm going to say, hey, in the chat, let us know who you are and where you're from. It's always fun to see who's joining us. We have a lot
where they're at. Yeah.
Where they're at. One of the things that is really interesting to me, and I'm sure you've experienced this in all the work that you do, but is just to realize what a global community we have. Very often we have people that are joining in from New Zealand and Australia, where it's 7:30 in the morning.
Right.
Right. There's a lot of people around the world that sometimes you feel very isolated and alone when you feel like you're up against these systems and trying to change things. But being able to do this kind of work and knowing that there's people all over is really helpful. So again, in the chat, let us know who you are and where you're from. And I see Sarah has already jumped on and said from Rochester, New York. Sarah, great to have you here. Others, please let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from. And with that, we'll go ahead and start a conversation. So gosh, I mean, where to start? I think there's a lot of different things that I'd like to talk about with you. But what I'd really like to do is, because I read a little bit of a bio, but that bio doesn't really tell your story. I wonder if you might tell us a little bit more about your story as a mom, and kind of what got you, to the point where not only did you become not an autism mom, but, kind of writing the book and, doing all the things that you do. So can you give us, and I'm sure some people are aware of some of your story, but would you share with us a little bit about, kind of how you came to be doing the things that you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. Sometimes I feel like I'm like a ping pong ball, just kind of like bouncing around and landing here and landing there. And I heard my own bio and it's like, well, that sounds impressive. but but in actuality, it's just,
you are impressive. Let me just say that you are impressive, and you've had a lot of impact in the things you've been doing. I mean, this book. I mean, we had the opportunity to do a book study. It again, the power of a single person to change more than they think they can change. So I appreciate your humility, but you've absolutely, are doing things. And I know you do things even kind of on a professional level where, working with family support, those differences those contributions are so critically vital. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I love working with families directly. But yeah, I didn't start out on this path just like you. I just adapted to circumstances, and when I learned something, I just started sharing what I was learning. In the beginning, I guess I wasn't sharing the right things, as you know, in my book, because I was learning from professionals, doctors, and in the medical field when my kids were diagnosed as autistic. And, I was learning things from the medical field, and then I found the autistic community, and it was like, my mind was just kind of like blown, because I didn't even know in the beginning that there was an autistic community, right? Like I had not been in that space. The doctors never mentioned, adult autistic people. I mean, they never mentioned anything beyond what was happening now, and what was wrong, and how to fix, and the therapies, and that timeline, that ticking timeline. Oh, you got to do it quickly or else I'm not sure what that or else would be, but they never mentioned the autistic community. They never mentioned one of my kids is mostly non-speaking, and pretty much completely non-speaking when he was younger. And they never mentioned to me that maybe he could, spell to communicate, or type on, or even mention an AAC device, So, in the beginning, I had a very different view of autism and didn't know what neurodiversity was. And then once I found the autistic community, my trajectory just changed, and it was just like a light came on. I mean, it was painful for a little while because I was unlearning, and that was kind of embarrassing, and learning about ableism and my own ableism, and all of the things that I would say before, and you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I learned a lot, and it was humbling for sure,
I mean, that very early experience, and as a father who's walked some of this as well, that you kind of mention it. I mean, you have a child that is diagnosed, and suddenly it's this deficit kind of mindset. It's this medical model of all the things that are wrong, and all the things that you shouldn't expect in life, and all the challenges that lie ahead. And I mean, it's a really tough place for a parent to be. But you're looking at
a bleak outlook.
Oh, absolutely.
That parents are getting.
Yeah,
Parents
absolutely.
are still getting this bleak outlook.
Right. Yeah, and that's the point, is in sharing your story, and I can relate to my own. You'd like to think, oh well, we're in a better place today, right? It's better than it was 10 years ago when we were going through this, but it so often is not. And I mean, so often is not listening to. I mean, I think we're we are conditioned in certain ways that I think are harmful. One of them is the focus on compliance that we have so heavily throughout our world leads us to a position where I think that we are often, in a position where when someone in a position of authority is telling us something, like a doctor, we kind of look at that as the gospel and say, okay, well, this is the expert. And you, of course, found out that there's a very different experts in all of this. But
Absolutely.
that initial journey of, these are all the things that are wrong. These are things you shouldn't expect. This is what you should be doing. What began to shift things? As you went from this early, very diagnostic, kind of base deficit approach. What began to shift things for you?
I'll tell you, it was the book I read, and it was The Reason I Jump. That was the first kind of eye-opening experience of a disabled person giving me the insights, like a disabled child. He was a child when he wrote this, giving those insights that, why do you rock? Why do you do this? It was just this very basic book of like a question and answer interview kind of style. And it completely changed my mind around like, oh, there is a reason. It's not that it's just, from the doctor's perspective, it's like he's just going through the motions. He's not here. He doesn't have empathy. He thinks you're a robot. Like all of these things that the doctors would say. And in reality, yeah, there is a reason he's rocking. There is a reason he's rocking. There is a reason that maybe he needs to go in the other room and chill out for a little while. It's not because he doesn't like other humans. It's it's a self-regulating thing. So I think that was the first kind of eye-opening experience for me, was when I read that book, and then I was hooked. I wanted to know more. I wanted to find other resources. And I wanted to share what I had learned. So that's kind of why I've gotten to where I am now, is because I just started sharing, because I was like, well, it took me this long to learn this. I don't want it to take the next parent that long to learn this, because it was maddening.
Right.
And the fact that, I had been, my twins, they were born premature. So they had been followed by, in the book, top doc. They've been followed by the tippity top of the doctors in the area, the developmental pediatricians, the best of the best. Not one time did anybody mention an AAC device. Not once. And, I would ask the doctors about apraxia, dyspraxia, and they would just kind of like, that's not a thing. When it turns out, like, if you listen to the non-speaking community, it is the thing. It is the thing. So, I think that my outrage and I was just livid about it. So I wanted to make sure that other parents didn't have to, wait as long to learn these things.
So, I want to go back a few years, and I also want to kind of preface this by saying that you and I were having a little bit of a conversation before we went on, and I was sharing kind of my love-hate with the internet sometimes. That social media, there's a lot of things out there, and this world right now can be tough. But in a positive regard, I think that the internet opened channels of communication that never existed before, and allowed people opportunities to share their experiences that many of us would never have had even access to before. Like,
Yeah,
we
the
would have had,
gatekeeping is gone.
right.
Anybody can, yeah.
That's right. But that wasn't all good, and it still isn't all good. A lot of it is good, but there's still some challenges here. And I think back a few years ago, and I'm gonna go in a direction that you can well, I'll let you respond to it. But going back a few years ago, and even today, I mean, I think about your book, and I think about even just the time that I've been doing this work that I've been doing, and going back 5 or 6 years, and a lot of parents, let's say, that were informed by that medical model, that hadn't gone on another journey, the internet began to become fertile soil for people that began sharing their stories, and sharing their stories from a perspective of, and I don't mean this to be too strong, but victims as like, poor me, this is my life, and my child is, suffers from all of these things, and you had kind of, and of course, not an autism mom, you had a lot of this growth of parents out there sharing journeys, but it was often from a very deficit based negative mindset, and many of the things that these parents were being told to do were things that weren't informed by where your journey was leading you. So your journey was leading you to who are the actual experts when it comes to being autistic. Is it the doctor, or is it somebody that is actually autistic? So
Right.
your journey's leading you in a different direction. But if we go back a number of years ago, and still today, there was this very different community out there that was forming. And I'm sure that, kind of in your early days, you saw this and then began to. So tell me a little bit. Does that, did you kind of see that as you were beginning on your journey as well? Were there things that you were connecting with, and then later like, oh, this
Well,
isn't what I
there's
thought it was?
so many layers to that, honestly. I mean, there's so many layers to that because, I have done that in the past.
Mhm.
Before I found the autistic community, I wrote this one viral article that, I won't ever be able to like move past. And I talked about this in the book. I wrote an article that said, the title was Autism is Nothing Like Going to Holland, that
Right.
poem, Welcome
Right.
to Holland,
Yep.
and it Welcome to the Jungle, right?
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
I was in this I was stuck in this loop of my kids were being, they were being so unhappy. They were so unhappy. They were screaming. They couldn't talk. I had not yet found AAC. I had not yet found the autistic community. And I was just like about to pull my hair out because like, what can I do? I'm struggling as a parent. It wasn't really about, oh, poor me. I think that was a little bit different. I was just kind of like shouting into the void of like, what am I supposed to do?
Right. Right.
How can I help my kids? And it obviously didn't come off that way, right? It came off of like poor me. So I think I'm
Yeah,
guilty of
and I'm
doing that.
glad you put that in a more empathetic way. I don't know that I phrased that quite the way I meant it, but I
No,
mean,
no, you
when
phrased
you're,
it right
yeah,
because
but
no,
when you're on the other side, if that's what you're receiving is negative deficit, that's the mindset you begin to carry because that's the
and
message you're being
that's
told.
why there's so many layers to
Right.
that
Right.
because there are the prominent, what do you call them, influencers that are still doing that today. They're making a choice to do that.
Right.
They know the autistic community, they've talked to the autistic community, they've learned from the autistic community, and yet still they are making the choice to do my child is a burden, and oh, poor me, I'm so sad, and look at us, and all of this stuff because it makes them money. I mean, I'll put it out there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's the
Yeah.
reason
I
that
mean, it hurts my heart to think that. I mean, I know as I, rationalize it that you're probably right, but it's so hard to think that. But,
it is
I,
what it is. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
see it all the time. I won't name names,
Right,
right?
right,
Like it,
right,
it doesn't
right,
matter
right,
because
right,
there's a lot of them out there that, there are families out there that haven't found the autistic community. They're
right.
still in that, only having that one perspective. But there are some that profit off of
Mm.
keeping other families that way.
Do
Uh,
you think? Do you think? So one of the things that I've seen with issues that we delve into, like restraint and seclusion, is that it's really hard, and I would say the majority of parents and caregivers that we come across are people that are very much in alignment with us in reducing, eliminating these things. But
right.
occasionally, you have somebody that reaches out that is in a different place, and they will kind of justify and rationalize and say why these things are necessary, or why they must be done, or why it has to happen to their child. And one of the things that I've seen is that I think that for someone that has either allowed something to be done, participated in doing something, it's really hard for them to shift sometimes because then it requires this whole
self-reflection.
That's right. This whole
Guilt.
self-reflection, and that's difficult.
It's hard.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, I mean, I know as a parent, like, you know, I wish that I knew 10 and 15 years ago what I know now. I'm gonna wish in another 10 years that I knew, you know, now what I knew then. But
Right.
you know, I think that you've got to provide yourself some grace. The only way you grow is by, you know, by acknowledging that and giving yourself some grace. But tell me, you know, you probably went through that kind of reflection as well. I mean, what was that like for you as you were beginning to learn more and kind of question things?
Well, I mean, it is embarrassing. I mean, that's one of the things, like, you know, especially for me being in kind of like living this out in public. Um, it's embarrassing, right? Like, knowing what I know now, like, how could I ever have done that? Right? Like,
Mm.
how could I ever have said that? Um, and the guilt is there, right? I mean, but also it's the same way with parenting in general, right?
Right,
Like,
right,
we are gonna screw up our kids a lot, right? We're gonna make the wrong decisions a lot. Like, I have two older kids, and I always say that I'm lucky because I'm kind of like a seasoned parent. I know that with having neurotypical kids, or I don't even know if they're neurotypical, but having kids that um you know, are pretty able to do, you know, the things that they need to do, it wasn't easy. Like having that perspective helps me with all of the rest of the stuff, right?
mm,
And a lot of these parents don't have that perspective.
mhm,
So
mhm.
when it's hard, when things happen, or when, you know, when parents are struggling, I feel like a lot of times they blame it on just that one part of parenting, of, you know, I have a disabled child, this is why it's hard, you know, and it's not always the
Right,
case. You
right,
know, it is hard. And I think that that's why it's important to meet parents where they are. You
right,
know,
right,
I'm no longer talking about the big influencers and all of the, you know, the
right,
major
right,
players,
right,
none of that. But like the educators that are in our schools right
right,
now, the parents that are coming up, it's important to meet them where they are, and wherever they are in that place in their journey, right?
mhm,
So I've had teachers teaching my kids that never heard of the autistic community, that only knew about, you know, PBS, or they didn't know it was ABA, right?
right,
PBIS is like, they don't know what ABA is, most of
right,
them in the
right,
schools. They only
right,
know, you know, behavior management and classroom management. And so they come from that world. And I think it's important to just respect that,
right, right,
and not get mad about
right,
it, but
right.
just, you know, gently nudge,
Mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm.
And the same as with the parents.
Yeah, you and I were having part of the, I mean, we had a busy little short conversation
We
before the
did.
show, and we were talking about this a little bit as well. And I think you and I share a perspective on this, which is meeting people where they are, bringing people along. You know, rather than sitting on top of the mountain and saying, "Well, I have reached this peak, and I know all of these great things, and all these things that you should know," and looking down on people. It's about putting the hand out to bring people along, to bring people up. I mean, ultimately, that's going to be beneficial. And like you said, I mean, it goes back to my, you know, well, one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou, kind of the "do the best you can until you know better. When you know better, do better." Like, we need to provide that grace to ourselves
Yeah.
and all other people that we're working with. And you know, I heard you as you were saying, well, you know, I feel a little ashamed and embarrassed about something, but you can't. You've got to give yourself grace. That was a journey, and you are continuing to learn. So tell me a little bit about, you know, so this evolution. So you start off and you're introduced to this world, and you know, kind of in the very medical model context of things, you begin to hear the voices of autistic self-advocates and others that is shaping and influencing you. When do you become not an autism mom? What happened there?
Well, you know, I became not an autism mom really early on. And that was, and it fits me today,
Yeah,
luckily, but
yeah.
it wasn't because of the
Same
reason that
reasons.
people that know me now would think
Right,
it was, right?
right,
Like,
right.
I grew into it, which is
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
but that's not the reason I chose that name.
Yeah,
I chose that name because when my kids were first diagnosed, like I started getting all these advertisements for like puzzle piece shirts and puzzle piece keychain, and like the shirts with like the heartbeat on it were like love needs no words, and all of that, all of those, just advertisement after advertisement after advertisement. And it felt weird to me, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why, but it just felt icky. Like, why would I want to do that again? And then after I'm thinking that, then I start feeling guilty. Like, oh, well, if I don't do that, then maybe I'm not proud of my kids. So it's like this whole thing. And then I do find the parents, that the big influencers again, right? I find these parents and I'm like, I don't think that way. I mean, even in the hardest of, like, even I had twins. I mean, that's hard in itself, right? Like, and then I had twins when they were toddlers, they were not speaking, and it was chaos. It was chaos. But even in the hardest of times, I wasn't ever like, this is so sad.
Right.
I was never like that, and
Right.
and it just didn't fit me. And all of that, all of the advertisements and it was just creepy to me. So I was like, no, I'm not an autism. Like, now I have to identify myself as like my kid.
Right.
Like, I'll put it in perspective. I did that in the book. My older kid has a nut allergy, right? And that was scary when he was young. He was a toddler. We were in the hospital like a lot. He had asthma, nut allergies. His face is like puffy like this. Never once. And that was really all encompassing, right? Like when we were in the thick of that, like never once did I think to myself, peanut allergy mom, or like asthma mom. Like, it didn't make sense to me.
Right.
And so I think that's where the
Yeah.
name came from.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, certainly it grew into and worked out well.
Yeah, it worked. It ended up fitting me pretty well, and I'm glad that I chose that name, and it means something a whole lot different now, obviously. And people that find me now and meet me now, they just assume it's because of that reason, but it's not really. And there are parents that do call themselves autism moms, and that's because they love their kids, right? They're not over here making $100 million a year because they're calling, they're it's because they love their kids, and it is placed on them. The phones are listening at the doctor's office, and their advertising is like super stealthy, and that's what they're getting from day one. Is they're getting flooded with that.
So let's move forward a little bit in your journey. How did you begin really hearing the voice of lived experience, getting a different perspective? Who were some of the people you were listening to or meeting, or what was that journey like for you?
Well, Jules was one, Jules Edwards, that's Autistic Typing on Facebook and website. And she and I, the book is kind of about our two journeys and how they crossed paths and clashed, and then ended up, being really productive, and, we're great friends now. She was one that was very critical of me in the beginning, and she did not mince words with me. Whenever I would post something that was ableist, even though back then I did not understand what she was talking about. She was one of the first people that like found my page and started challenging me. And at first I was not even having it, because I had not found the autistic community, didn't know what she was talking about. And so she really challenged me. And then from there, Kieran Rose, the autistic advocate, has been one of my greatest teachers, because he is so patient and so knowledgeable. And then I mean, there's been so many people that I've just learned from and became friends with and have participated with me in things. Gosh, there's so many, like,
Yeah, sure.
Tiffany from, gosh, names and pages, I can never, like, Fishes and Fries,
Right, right. Yeah,
other
right, right,
Tiffany,
right, right.
from oh my gosh, Tiffany, what is your page name? It's gonna come to me in a little while. Like, it's
Mhm.
just so many that I have met, and I've been able to, pick their brains and ask
Mhm.
questions and have been patient with me
Mhm.
and have participated with me in my own interviews. Like,
Mhm.
that I'm not used to participating in an interview. I'm always the one who is, doing the interview in the book club, and so many people have just said yes. Diego Pena is one. He's I don't know how old he is now. He's got to be an adult by now, but he spells to communicate, and he came on and did an interview. Danny Whitty with Danny with Words. He came on, and I met Danny when he was not fluent with spelling yet or
Mhm.
typing.
Mhm.
And he was
Mhm.
just beginning that journey, and meeting him and learning from him, especially the non-speaking community, has been
Mhm.
everything to
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
it just has been it just has opened my eyes so much, and I feel like it's just happened so quickly. I know it's been like 5 years or 6 years,
Right.
because I think you and I kinda came up around the same time,
Mhm.
but it
Mhm.
feels like it's just all been lumped together into just this one. I've been fortunate,
Right.
honestly.
Right.
I've been
Right.
very fortunate to have people who would take the time with me and would, um call me out if I need to, call
Right.
me
Right.
out, that's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
But
but
I
help
mean,
you understand things.
yeah. Um, it is not trivial that you are the kind of person that could find yourself being called out and really listen and reflect and grow. That's not an easy thing for people to do. Like, we
Yeah,
have a tendency sometimes to dig in and dig in deeper, and I think it's really hard. I've had conversations with other folks about this, but when your intentions are good and the things you're doing are perhaps harmful, even though your intentions are good and you don't realize they're harmful, it's really hard to take that criticism sometimes. And I think we all run into that, where well, our intent is this, but here's our impact over here. But I mean, it says a tremendous amount about you as a human being, because I can tell you a lot of people really struggle with that. And I do believe that, like many things in life, these are sometimes skills that we can develop further if we make an effort to do so. But we have a natural tendency sometimes to really dig in. If you look at, you look at how divided we seem to be as a nation right now, and people are
yeah, it
very
seems to just
entrenched
be
in.
getting worse and worse,
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. I mean, I've always found that you know, listening is really important, right? And if you really have honest conversations, there's so much potential for growth. But and I found that there were people that I disagreed with heavily, but giving them the opportunity to really share their thoughts and their feelings, and to listen, I mean, it's so critical. So I mean, I mean, I know you are who you are, and it's like, well, you deserve a lot of credit for that, and you're like, well, it's just kind of who I am, because you're naturally curious, right? But that's really a big thing, and I think that's something we all need to work on. Is it's easy to take offense, and I mean, we were talking about social media earlier, and you can look at a thread, bunch of good intentioned people, that suddenly somebody says something, and next thing you know, you've got this
It's
really.
hard.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
yep,
hard,
yep,
and
yep,
especially with this topic, when you
right,
have so many different influences coming in and so many different perspectives. You have these parents who are struggling, right?
right.
Trying to get services, not even knowing which are the best services, and like just trying to help their kids, right?
And listening to the people that they think they should be able to listen
Yeah.
to and
I
believe, right? The,
mean,
the, the experts, right?
yeah, like they're going to the best of the best, like
Right.
I did. Like, they're going to the Autism Centers for Excellence,
Mm.
right? They're going to these places because they want to help their kids. They want their kids to thrive. Like, all parents or most parents do, right?
Right.
And then you have, the autistic community is so diverse. I mean, we have, non-speakers, we have, multiply marginalized people who are, you have Black autistics, you have non-speaking autistics, non-speaking Black autistics, you have autistic people from everywhere, like in different cultures, and it's so diverse and everybody's experience is so different. And that makes it really hard to
Mhm.
have these conversations because there is no binary. There's no this is right, this is wrong.
Right. Right.
There's none of it.
Right.
Because when like we talked about a little bit about I'll bring up the Loudoun County issue, right?
Okay.
So Loudoun County, we're in Virginia. Their school board voted to you describe it, please, because I'm gonna
Sure,
mess it
sure.
up.
So, Loudoun County was recently reviewing their restraint seclusion policy, and that was a process that started about a year ago. And of course, in Virginia, there was a lot of activity over the last several years around the use of restraint seclusion. There was a big lawsuit in Fairfax
Thanks
County,
to y'all.
Virginia. Yep,
Thanks
yep,
to y'all.
yep. Where, well, not necessarily to us, but there were a lot of people. I mean, we had a number of volunteers that were involved in that
For sure.
lawsuit and involved in that work. But this has been an issue in Virginia, and of course, Virginia had regulations, but they didn't have law. And anyway, the issue has been one that has been an important issue across the state. And while there are now some regulations at the department level, there's still a lot of flexibility in how
Very
districts might.
vague.
Yeah, very, very vague, and not enough at all. But at any rate, the issue came up to Loudoun County. Loudoun County was one of the districts that 5-6 years ago was being called out. You may remember
Yeah.
Gigi and
Yeah.
the story in the Washington Post
Yeah.
with Gigi, kind of in this makeshift seclusion space. Actually, the mother was actually a volunteer with us for many years, and so it's been an issue there in Loudoun County for a number of years. But the um, policy came back to the Board of Education. They've been reviewing it. We provided a letter. I know others have provided support to this as well. One of the things, we push for, ending seclusion.
Right.
And really, honestly, greatly reducing the use of restraint. Restraint should be something that's exceedingly unusual. It should not be something that's happening as commonly as it does. But at any rate, in all this reviewing, Loudoun County spent a lot of time looking at this policy and got a lot of great input. There's a number of community organizations that were involved. And I don't remember specifically the organizations off the top of my head, but there have been a number of families and parents
It's
that have
just a
been
lot.
involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at any rate, they've been going through working to look at the policy. The suggestion was made that they prohibit the use of seclusion. A lot of robust discussion. We provided input on it. And just recently they passed a policy to prohibit the use of seclusion. So
Let's get a little win.
that's right.
We
That's
can
right.
do a little
That's right.
dance for
That's
some
right.
progress.
That's right. Yeah. And any progress is good progress. I mean, you and I were chatting about this as well. I mean, making a difference for a kid is something really important and meaningful. Making a difference for a classroom or a district like this is really meaningful.
And
But of
it
course, the
creates
hard work.
ripples.
Yeah, and the hard work continues. But Fairfax County, after the lawsuit, they banned the use of seclusion. Of course, we were using that as in Loudoun County as an example to say, hey, look at your neighbor over here and look what they
Right.
did. And look at the whole state of Maryland. We actually got a win a couple of years ago in getting Maryland to prohibit seclusion in public schools. But this is unfortunately work that's a little bit. An attorney friend of mine called it whack-a-mole, right? It's kind of one thing you pop down and another thing pops up.
Yeah.
So this is ongoing work, but it is good to see some positive progress.
Yeah.
Certainly.
But and even in that space, right, where you think it could be very binary of like, seclusion and restraint, bad, let's ban it. And then, everything else good. It's not like that, right? Those discussions were hard because you
Absolutely.
have people who, the what abouts, right? Well,
Right.
what about when this happens? What about when this happens? How are we supposed to do this? Like, there are this type of work when you have the educators and you have, the superintendents and you have the school board and you have the general public who doesn't know anything about it, but just that they want their kids to be in a calm classroom. Like, you know what I mean? So you have all of these different influences. A very small minority of them know anything about the disability justice movement. I didn't, right? I didn't when I was a teacher. I didn't when I was a parent of older kid, my older kids. So like only a little tiny bit of them know anything about that. And how restraint and seclusion affects the children that are going through this, how it affects the children that are witnessing this, right? And so even in those spaces where you would think it's more binary, it's not. It is exhausting. It's exhausting, and it takes a lot of patience to meet people where they are and say, you know what, I kind of see where you're coming from.
Absolutely. And your
It's hard
concern,
to say, isn't it?
yeah. But your concerns matter. Like, yes, I'm very upset about this child that was restrained and traumatized and all of these things. But as a teacher, yes, absolutely, you have a right to be safe in the classroom.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we've tried to focus on in our work is the fact that, I'm a big believer in the fact that the same thing that you can do to improve the outcomes for kids and the kids where we're often talking about when it comes to all of this restraint, seclusion, all the punitive and exclusion, children with disabilities, Black and brown kids, kids with a trauma history, neurodivergent kids.
Right.
There's certain kids that are on the other side of this
The
really
vulnerable
frequently.
kids.
That's right. But
Right.
I firmly believe that the same thing that you can do to improve the outcomes that these children will have can also improve the outcomes for the teachers,
Everybody.
the staff, the families, and the community. But it takes getting people on board, and it takes listening, and it takes working together. And we've got to practice what we preach. Like if I say I want you to collaborate with kids, I've got to be willing to collaborate with you too.
Right.
And that's hard work sometimes.
And
People
it's
get very
hard
entrenched.
to get everybody.
Right.
Each of those people has to go across that unlearning bridge.
Right.
Sharon, she's somebody that was in one of my book clubs with, we did a month-long beyond behavior study with like 200 people from all different walks of life. And Sharon is one of the people that was in there. And she said, it's like that unlearning is going over a bridge, and it is so hard to do, right? And that means that every single person making these decisions has to walk across that bridge and has to go through that kind of that guilt, the embarrassment, the knowledge that they were doing this, right? That maybe they were wrong. And it's hard to get a lot of people across that bridge at one time.
On part of that journey on that bridge is also the self-forgiveness and the compassion for yourself. Like you've absolutely got to bring that, you've
And
absolutely
once you
got to
get
say, hey,
over it,
I
it's so
was
much
doing
better.
the best I could at that moment in time. And
once
now
you
I
get
know.
over it, it is so much better.
Right.
On that other side.
I want to pause for a moment because we've had a couple more hellos here, and I'm realizing as we've gotten like over 45 minutes in our conversation that we could probably talk for the next 3 hours. But let me pause for a second and just give a couple shout outs for folks that had said hello. Tara from Columbus. We had Denise here from the UK.
Nice.
Bridget here from Chicago. Sarah, of course, was from New York and just kind of weighed in and said there's still a lot of professionals that think that kids will outgrow it when we were talking about that.
Let's wait and see.
Yeah, Sarah Forbes.
Hey, Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah.
I saw Sarah actually recently at the conference, as a matter of fact.
I know.
Yeah. So others, if you're on, let us know in the chat who you are, where you're from. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to put that in the chat as well. I will apologize. I know when I get a guest like Meghan, I get really excited and have lots of things I want to talk about, but the things that are on your mind matter. So if you've got a question or a comment, feel free to put that in the chat. And I'll try to get to a couple questions and comments as well when we go along. So I want to transition for a second, back to, this journey. And I think that the value in our journeys is really, I think, significant because, that's at least what I want is like, I want other people to, if they're not on a journey, to go on a journey. If they're farther ahead than I am, then I want them to help bring me along on the journey. Like this is so critical. And I think that when we share these stories and experiences that we have, I think it can really help others to realize that, they can do that too. But, thinking back, and I want to get to talking a little bit more about the book as well. but thinking back, it's some of the really big revelations that you had as you began to hear those many voices that you mentioned a few minutes ago of the people that were kind of influencing your thoughts and challenging you. What were a couple of the really big things that suddenly it was like a light bulb moment for you that changed? And I'm going to say changed everything, but what I mean by that, I mean, I know on my own journey, there were certain things that I learned that suddenly it was like they were such significant game changers. When I learned, for instance, how much influence my own response to a situation had on where the situation went. When I realized that when my son was having a hard time, if I took a step backwards, if I was using a really calm and even voice and not being threatening, how much that would change where the situation, so I think back to those moments and those things that I learned that really did change a lot. And of course, um, as you can relate to, I didn't have the word for co-regulation when some of this first started with my
Right.
son, but then I was like, "Oh, well, of course, that's what I'm doing," as I began to learn these things. What were some of those big shifters for you?
I think the first one, and it might not resonate with everybody, but it was Kieran Rose. I read an article from him, and it was about autistic burnout. And we hear the word regression all the time, right? That's that medical model, like, okay, they had these skills, now they don't have these skills. They were talking, now they're not talking. They were doing great with potty training, and then all of a sudden they're not. And so we use that word regression all the time. And it was an article that Kieran wrote, and it talked about autistic burnout and needing like the bandwidth for other things, right? So like when stressful situations come up, when you're moving, or when like a big transition is happening and you see these regressions. I don't even think he phrased it in the way of regression, but it just made me feel like when I learned about autistic burnout, it was like, oh, because when that happens, when we see regressions, our first, what we're told to do, like medical model, the first thing we try to do is push through it, right? Oh my gosh, they're not pottying anymore. We really need to get on this timer and this blah, blah, whatever, whatever it is. Or, oh my gosh, they were doing this writing and now they can't do the writing. So now we just need to push through and get them, write some more and make sure we're doing it every day. And it's counterintuitive, right? Because they're showing you that they can't do that right now, right? And there's a reason for that. And instead of pushing through, we should be taking care. And that was a big one for me. Just that flip of the switch. And it makes so much sense now that I've got it, but it never occurred to me that like all of these things that we're doing are making it worse, right? Are making the situation worse. I know trauma is like a buzzword now, but like we are inflicting even more stress on our
Right,
kids
right,
because of
right.
what we think we're supposed to do.
Right. And that chronic stress, does have an impact. And it's a biological impact. Beyond the buzzword, there's a biological impact from
Yes,
sustained stress. And that sustained stress, leads to hypervigilance, leads to more stress behavior. A lot of the things that we're doing that are failing not only aren't working, but they lead to more,
they're
not
making it
less.
worse.
Right,
Yeah, they're
right,
making
right.
it worse. And so in line with that, it was a few years after that. There was a point when we stopped all therapies at our house. Nothing, no speech, no, like we're not going to speech after school, or we're going to school, right? Let's go to school. After school, we are home. We are going to the park. We're going to the beach. We're going to we're going to do all of the things to enjoy ourselves. We're going to experience all of the things that we deserve to experience. But we stopped all therapies. And you know what happened? The burst of development that came after that. And I'm not saying to do that for development. It ended up happening that they had the bandwidth to work on like their own native strengths, like things that they wanted to work on, things that they, riding a bike was one of them. I can't think of any others, but like that started happening, and they taught me that that was the right decision. It wasn't, I could have been judged. And if I was a Black parent, I probably would have had CPS called on me, right? So there's that part of it. So I'm not saying that, oh, you should stop all your therapies, because protect you and your family.
Right.
But it came out of that, and it really solidified it to me that, no, we're not doing that. They're going to develop on their own times. And if they want to start like some sort of extra, curricular, or they want to study something, or they're interested in something, or, if my kid wants to go to speech therapy, sure, we can go. But I'm not dragging them anywhere anymore.
So I'm going to ask you a question to put yourself back in time a little bit. But, if you were to go back in time with the benefit of having a conversation with yourself, so yourself after, getting a diagnosis, after getting a lot of bad news and being overwhelmed with all the things that you need to do, what would you tell yourself? What would you tell yourself then, based on what you know now? I mean, what advice would you give to a parent that might be on their way home listening to this and just have gotten this news that is just shattered, kind of what they're thinking and kind of the things that they imagined. What really critical things might, and I guess, I mean, there's so much, right? There's so much you could, but what are some of the critical things you would want to tell your past self? I mean, knowing all the things that you know today. And that's probably more an essay
something
than
that
a
I want to
question.
say, but then I know that my younger self would have been like, shut up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about?
But let's hear some of those things. And then we'll figure out how to con your younger self into listening.
I know my younger self is very feisty.
Yeah.
It would be, so Jules is someone that has come up with a term called Autism Moon, right? And it's like a honeymoon. And so what I would tell myself is to go listen to the autistic community, go learn, just do nothing for like a year. You get the diagnosis, just do nothing. Nothing's going to happen. Nobody's going to like fall off the cliff or anything like that. Like, just do nothing and just enjoy your child, go to the park, go to the, do all of the things you did before. And just start, reading or listening to a podcast or something like that with the autistic community centered, right? Go read Danny with Words. He has a magazine. I think it's called Leo in Bloom. I probably said that wrong. Go to Tiffany, Nigh Functioning Autism. Go there and just listen and don't act on anything. It just like enjoy your child, because
right.
I know they say that all the time, like you blink and they grow up and you'll never get this time again, but it is true, and you don't want to spend their entire childhood miserable going to this therapy and that therapy. And another thing is that learning doesn't only happen within 4 white walls with those fluorescent lights on top of them.
I think it's one of the hardest places for learning to happen.
That is not
right.
Like, you do not have to go there for your children to develop. Go do something y'all like to do. If you don't like the beach, go somewhere else. If you don't, like wherever it is, keep your babies safe and just do nothing.
Yeah. But meanwhile, and I think you, I think, kind of our feelings here on a lot of the compliance-based approaches and behaviorism and ABA and PBIS. But on the other end of that, there are a lot of people that getting the recommendation is, okay, we need to start right away, 40 hours a week of ABA. So what are your thoughts there in terms of what you might tell that parent who has said, well, we've gone to this great center and this is what we've been told?
I mean, that's all they're recommending right now. And
Right.
back up one more, and actually this goes with that. I would tell the parent that this is not an emergency.
Right.
Being autistic is not a medical emergency. You can chill, relax, give it a year, do all of these things like the Autism Moon, like in Jules, the Jules had described in Autism Moon. The only thing that I would say is an emergency is communication access.
Okay.
So these kids that are not able to communicate their feelings, their wants, their needs, all of these things, I would say, do get on board with that. Do start giving them as much communication access as possible. High functioning autism has some really good stuff out there. Assistive wear has some great stuff out there. I don't want to make it like I'm choosing one over the other, but just say no to PECs, right? So just say no to that program and not pictures.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I have to do a visual. So
Go ahead.
Pictures, right? This is these are pictures, right? Don't say no to these. These are pictures. Use your pictures, use your visual schedules, all of that. PECs is a program. It's a brand.
Right.
PECs with a registered trademark on it. Say no to that.
Right.
If your preschool is using the PECs program, you might want to ask what they mean by that, right? Because they might just be talking about pictures. But PECs is not communication access. PECs is compliance, right? So know that. I mean, and there's a lot of things that need to be like, you have to decipher these things, right? You have to learn all of these money grabbing.
Right.
Autism is a booming business, and people have been, really coming up off of that. So you really have to know, you have to decipher. You have to be really,
And when did you begin to learn about and begin to implement some communication? Whether AAC or what was your road like on that? I mean, I know we have one of our volunteers who does a lot of work around like toddler AAC, like really starting kids out early. And Cass has done some great presentations on that. But what was your journey like in that regards?
Frustratingly slow, and to think of all the privilege I have as being a teacher, being well educated, knowing about, I grew up in early intervention stuff and early childhood development, and I still didn't know what an AAC device was. So like putting that in perspective, so we did early intervention very early on. So we had speech therapists and OTs coming in the house, and really, I love early intervention people. They're like the best because they're really family driven. It wasn't ABA. It was like, the speech lady would come in and play with them, or, we had swallowing issues. So there was, that kind of stuff, but they were the ones who kind of showed the pictures, right? Like put some pictures on some and like Velcro them. Here's like put some magnets on the fridge so that they can like, instead of screaming at you, they can go get a picture and say, hey, I want some Cheetos or whatever it is. But that was kind of where I began. And I was in that space for way too long. And I'll add that my kids also went to early childhood preschool. Like they were in the school system since they were 2 years old, like half days, still didn't know what an AAC device was. So my kid was like 4 before he got his first device.
And even if people do know what they are, there are people that are pushing against, like, well, if you do that, then they're never going to learn. I knew the eye roll was coming there. But I mean, there are people that are actively pushing.
Well, they're telling them that. They're telling them that.
Right.
And so me and Tiffany from High Functioning Autism, we used to do a lot of webinars on that topic of AAC and just expanding communication options for for toddlers. We haven't done one in a long time, just because things have gotten so hectic, but there are so many options out there, and really any of them is better than nothing. Any of these options is better than nothing. and giving your toddler that autonomy and
Mm-hmm.
learning early on that they are very competent, right? Because
Right.
before
Right.
they have any communication, you don't know whether they're
Right.
competent or not.
Right.
You,
Right. Right.
presuming competence, that came a long time
Right.
after, it should have for me.
Right.
Uh, and so like getting them access to those high tech devices. And yeah, there is a difference between low tech and high tech. They say they have to do low tech first and be able to
Right.
do that.
Right.
But they're two different processes, right?
Right.
This is like a low tech board, right? You see these in the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
preschools. This is much different than having your own device and being able to push the button and it says it.
Mm-hmm.
This,
Mm-hmm.
you have to point to the right thing. God forbid you point to the wrong thing. Oh my gosh, you only get one chance. You have to
Mm-hmm.
have another person
Right.
looking at
Right.
where you're
Right.
pointing. You have to
Right.
have their
Right.
attention.
And there has to be an element of exploration to this, right? This is not just about compliance because that's right, right. But sometimes that's what it turns into.
Right. And so
Yeah,
like if they have their own device, they're able to push the buttons, they're able to explore, they're able to do these things, in their own time
right,
and
right,
become comfortable with it.
right.
So all of that to say is that communication access is definitely
Yeah,
something that I would
yeah.
focus on in
I
this.
think any parent caregiver or anyone interested in this, the film, It's Not About Me, the story of Jordan Zimmerman. I mean, you want something that really will have an impact and help shape kind of the way you
It's the best.
understand
And
this.
any teacher,
Right.
that's like going to be the best 60 minutes that you
Absolutely.
spend all year.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing, like, when parents say, "Well, what do I do? How do I," you share things like that, and Jordan's amazing. I mean, we've had
Yeah,
Jordan on the podcast as well, and been in events where Jordan's been speaking, and absolutely amazing. But the whole story, and again, it's the knowing what we know now and how much better we can do. Moving in that direction of like toddler AAC and accessibility. Certainly have had the opportunity to collaborate with, people like, Communication First is a great organization.
absolutely. Yeah.
So there's definitely some options out there. So we are quickly like getting to the end of our time here, but I want to pivot for a second and have you tell us a little bit more about the book, what led to it, and kind of like at a really high level. I mean, what is this book all about? And then
Well, I mean,
I want to know what the next one you're working on is going to be.
oh gosh. That's so funny. Um, the book is about all of the things, right? There's no one topic in that book. And it's centered around the conversation between, parents of autistic kids and the autistic community, right? And both of us and also knowing that there's like a combination of autistic parents of autistic kids. Like there's so many layers in this book. But it's centered around just trying to be a little bit more patient with each other, even giving strategies to each other to help with that communication. We do a lot of calling our own communities in. And it also, one of my favorite parts of the book is that we have so many contributors. So there's the way it's structured is kind of weird, which is typical for us, but like it's every section has a contributor from the autistic community. They're all autistic, but from all of the like so many different corners of the autistic community. So we have, you know, we have Black autistic people, we have non-speakers, we have AAC users, we have, from the LGBTQIA community, all of just it's all encompassing. So it really does blend so many different perspectives. And a lot of the times it's kind of funny. The book will sometimes contradict itself because we don't agree on everything. And
Right.
we go through that in the book, and you can see it in the contributors essays. You can see it in Jules and I's back and forth, that not everything is one message. And I think that that's what makes the book special. There's no like singular message, but I think the biggest message is that we want to make a better world for our kids, right? Everybody in the book wants the world to be kinder to our kids. We want to create a better world for our kids. And so we can all, that's something we can all agree on. I
Right.
think that's the
Right.
one thing we can all agree on.
Right.
Um,
And listening and learning from each other, right? I mean, I mean, as simple as that sounds, it's really easy to get stuck in your perspective, and without that different perspective, there's so much to be missed. There's so much that you're not getting when you're stuck in that perspective.
and even if you think you're listening, like listen 3 times before
Right.
you,
Right.
listen, then speak and ask clarifying questions,
Right.
because
Right.
a lot of times we're on the internet. We're in
Right.
the comment sections that are going fast, and
Right.
it's not the best it's not the best
No.
scenario
No. No.
for this type of engagement. But there are so many people that have built communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are smaller groups. There are, some people have, membership groups, like y'all have a membership and y'all do things. There are so many, like find a group that you're comfortable with, right? Like not everybody's going to be comfortable with me. Uh, Not everybody's going to be comfortable with you, right? So find those groups
Right.
and just keep going.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, well, highly recommend the book. Of course, we had it previously for book study, and I'm sure we will do it again for book study. So definitely go check it out, and I think Courtney will throw the link in here as well. Um, as we get towards the end here, what are you working on now? Like, what kind of things are what kind of work are you doing? What kind of things are on your plate? What's either keeping you up at night or occupying your brain when you should be doing something else?
So many things, I'll tell you. I actually, and my followers know this, I took on a new role. I
Mhm.
actually have like a full-time job now, and I'm working as a parent support specialist or family support specialist for our state's PTI. And so let me just give a little bit of background. I know we have to go, but
Oh, you're
every
fine. You're fine.
every state in the US has a parent training information center. And that's called a PTI because special education loves acronyms. And those are places where you can get free assistance with the special education process. So I am fortunate enough to, work for my PTI now, and I'm able to do that for families in Virginia. So it's been amazing because it's the work I love doing. It's the work that I was doing before. I started with a PTI. I was just doing it on more of a national level for
Mhm, mhm,
myself. But it has been great, and it has been very consuming. I'll tell you,
mm, mhm, mhm.
having a full time job now. I've had some family issues, so I've been I pulled back a little bit from
Sure,
my
sure.
Facebook page as kind of a protection for
Right.
for the people that I'm dealing with, because I have to have a lot of patience, and so I've pulled back a little bit, and hopefully I'll be back in the swing of things soon.
Mm, mhm.
Yeah.
And what's the name of the PTI that you're with?
Uh, Another acronym. It's called a PEATC, PEATC, and it stands for Parent Educational Advocacy Training Center. Acronyms are so hard for
Yeah,
me.
they are for sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you're in
So
Virginia,
yeah.
and you need help.
And as you said, there's at least one in every state. In fact, I just threw the link up in the chat as well. It's interesting.
California has 3, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Here in Maryland, it's Parents Place of Maryland. I mean, we've got them all over. We've actually collaborated. I mean, I've gone to Pennsylvania and did a talk for their training center. But there's one in every state, and it's interesting. The parent training centers are one of my early recommendations for folks when we start talking about somebody going through a situation. Where can you get resources? The parent training center, the disability law centers are often another resource that
Yes,
I mention
for
to people as
sure.
well. But and of course, the one caveat is that I've worked with PTIs across the country, and they're not all created equally. Some of them focus on different things. Some of them are much further ahead than others. I mean, all of this, all of this is
Well, because
always
it
a
is part of
journey,
the
right?
system, right? I mean,
Right.
these are not, yeah, like this is part of the system. We
That's right.
are, within the system. So yeah.
Yep, yep. And even within that, I mean, one of the things that I think is really important to remember is that sometimes our allies, people that are aligned with us in our goals, may still have views and ideas that are based on ideas that we think aren't the right ideas, and
Right.
and those are people we want to bring along too, because they're our friends and allies, and those are conversations that are worth having. And I think that's what's so important about the work that you do, the book that you wrote. I mean, it's all about journeys, and bringing people along for the journey, and kind of continuing to learn. I love that you start out your bio as kind of a continuous learner, but I mean, that's so critical, because we're going to learn more, we're going to know more. I mean, just the very simple things. I mean, for me, behavior is such an important part of all of this, because so often kids are, so many things are done to kids in the name of behavior, like restraint and seclusion, but
Absolutely.
a lot of other things. And even just getting people to shift their mindset around behavior and understand behavior through the biological lens. Understand behavior is biology. Understand that human behavior is driven by our brain and our nervous system. Like, that changes everything from when you just perceive it like, oh, they're making a choice, they know what they're doing, they're trying to gain attention, they're doing these things. These shifts that we can get people to make, whether they're allies or otherwise, really is what this is all about. And you do such a beautiful job of not only having your own journey and your own curiosity, which led you to all the things that you've done that have been impactful for a community out there. But it really, is, I think, so important that we encourage others. I mean, that curiosity, I think, is so critical to this.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I
Yeah.
will say that the one book that that really turned me around and flipped me on my head was Beyond Behaviors by
Mhm, mhm.
Dr. Mona De La Hook, who
Yep.
I love
I
so much.
I
And that
I
book
I I I
just
Yeah, I love Mona. Mona's somebody that I feel fortunate enough to not only call a colleague, but a friend, and somebody that I
same.
care deeply for. And I actually we were texting the other day, and
Nice.
yeah, I was she's just such an amazing person. But that book, I mean, that's one that I've recommended for IEP team meetings and
I
parents
give it
and
to every team,
educators.
every IEP team,
Yep,
every
yep,
year.
yep,
Here
yep.
you go.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. Robin Goebel's book I really like a lot too. That's another one that I think is a good lens shifter for people that kind of. Have you read that Big Baffling Behavior, supporting kids with, or Big Baffling Behavior? Fantastic book.
I don't think I
Robin.
have that one. I'll write
Yeah,
that
yeah,
down.
yeah. Put on your list. Put on your Amazon list, or wherever you get your books. I
Big
don't want to
baffling
endorse anybody
behaviors,
here.
huh?
Listen, we've kind of reached the end of our time, and I promised to only keep you to 4:45, and it's 4:47. But I still want to give you the last word. Any final thoughts you want to share? Any words of inspiration? Anything that you have coming up? I'll give you the final thoughts if there's anything you'd like to share with our audience here.
Well, I'll just tell you that I'm not promoting anything today. I'm not promoting anything. I'm really grateful that, to be on your podcast, to always be able to collaborate with you and work with you behind the scenes. I've been very grateful for that. And I love the work that y'all are doing. And anybody that wants to support our kids and help protect our kids, become a member of Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. They do really great work.
I appreciate that, and I really appreciate you, and it's been great to kind of know you from a distance for some time, and having you here and getting to really talk to you. I've really enjoyed the
Same.
conversation. So we'll have to have you back, and if you're doing podcasts, I'll join you for one of yours, and
That would be awesome.
keep the conversation going. I want to thank everybody that was here with us today and joining us for this conversation. And as always, I encourage you, share these with, if you're a parent or a caregiver, share them with other parents or caregivers, share them with educators. This is the way we help to influence change. When we get these ideas, we share them, we encourage people, it really can make a difference. So thank you all for joining us today. Megan, I'm going to ask you to stick around, but we're going to say goodbye to everybody else. And we will be back again in 2 weeks with another exciting show. I've got the guest name just flew out of my mind, but it's an exciting one, I think, in 2 weeks. So anyway, we will see you
Bye,
then.
y'all.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks.